Imagine growing up in a world with no smartphones, no streaming, and no caller ID. Just bikes, cartoons, and cereal boxes with hidden treasures. If you were a kid in the 1970s, you lived a life that today's children might find completely unbelievable. From mixtapes to superhero underwear, here are 12 things from the 70s that kids today will never truly understand, and that made growing up back then absolutely unforgettable. Limited TV channels and no remote control. Back in the 1970s, watching television was a completely different experience compared to today. There were only 3 major broadcast networks: ABC, CBS, and NBC, along with PBS, the public broadcasting service. That was it. No cable, no streaming platforms, and definitely no binge watching. If you miss your favorite show, you had to wait for a rerun, which might not come for weeks or months. There was no pausing, rewinding, or fast-forwarding. You watched what was on when it was on. Changing the channel wasn't as simple as pressing a button. You had to physically get up, walk to the TV, and turn a dial. And if the signal wasn't clear, you might have to adjust the rabbit ear antennas, sometimes wrapping them in aluminum foil to improve reception. TVs were bulky, heavy, and often housed in wooden cabinets that doubled as furniture. Programming was scheduled and predictable. Primetime shows aired in the evening, and Saturday mornings were sacred for kids. That was cartoon time, a few hours of animated fun before the rest of the day's programming took over. Kids would pour a big bowl of sugary cereal, sit cross-legged in front of the TV, and soak in every minute of Scooby-Doo, the Flintstones, or Looney Tunes. There was a sense of anticipation and ritual around watching TV. Families gathered together to watch shows like Happy Days, The Brady Bunch, or MASH Star. You didn't scroll endlessly through options. You made do with what was available. And somehow, that made it more special. Saturday morning cartoons. For kids growing up in the 1970s, Saturday mornings were sacred. It was the one time of the week when television belonged entirely to them. From the moment they woke up, children would rush to the living room, pour a heaping bowl of sugary cereal, and plant themselves in front of the TV for hours of animated entertainment. This wasn't just a routine, it was a ritual. Unlike today, where cartoons are available 24/7 on streaming platforms, back then they were limited to a specific window: Saturday morning. Networks would line up a block of animated shows that ran from around 7 a.m. to noon. Shows like Scooby-Doo, The Jetsons, Fat Albert, Super Friends, and the Bugs Bunny / Roadrunner Hour dominated the airwaves. These programs weren't just fun. They were cultural touchstones that shaped the humor, imagination, and values of an entire generation. There was something magical about knowing that everyone else, your friends, your classmates, were watching the same shows at the same time. Monday morning at school often began with conversations about what happened on Josie and the Pussycats or the Pink Panther. It created a shared experience that today's on-demand viewing can't replicate. The commercials during these cartoon blocks were also part of the charm. They advertised toys, cereals, and games that were directly aimed at kids. You'd see ads for Hot Wheels, Barbie, G.I. Joe, and board games like Operation or Hungry Hungry Hippos. It was a full sensory experience. Bright colors, catchy jingles, and the promise of fun. Saturday morning cartoons weren't just entertainment. They were a weekly celebration of childhood, imagination, and joy. And for those who lived through it, the memory of those mornings, cereal in hand, eyes glued to the screen, remains one of the most nostalgic parts of growing up in the 1970s. Mixtapes and cassette culture. In the 1970s, making a mixtape was more than just compiling songs. It was a labor of love and a true art form. Unlike today's digital playlists, creating a mixtape required patience, precision, and a bit of luck. You'd sit by the radio for hours, waiting for the perfect song to play. When it finally did, you had to press a record and play buttons at exactly the right moment. If your timing was off, you'd catch the DJ talking over the intro or miss the beginning entirely. And that was just part of the charm. Cassette tapes were the heart of music sharing. They were small, portable, and allowed people to listen to music anywhere, in the car, on a Walkman, or through a boombox. But they weren't perfect. Tapes would often get tangled or eaten by the player, and the universal fix was to stick a pencil into the reel and manually rewind it. It was a common sight to see someone twisting a cassette with a pencil, trying to save their favorite mix. Mixtapes were deeply personal. You could make one for a friend, a crush, or just for yourself. Each tape told a story. The order of the songs, the transitions, even occasional background noise from the radio. It was a way to express feelings, share musical tastes, and create something uniquely yours. The process was slow, but that made it meaningful. There was also a sense of discovery. Record stores and radio stations introduced people to new artists and hidden gems. You'd hear a song once and rush to record it, hoping to catch it again later. Unlike today's algorithm-driven recommendations, musical exploration in the 70s was organic and exciting. For those who lived through it, the mixtape era represents a time when music was more tactile, more intentional, and more connected to emotion. It wasn't just about listening. It was about curating, crafting, and sharing a piece of yourself through sound. Underoos and superhero underwear. In the 1970s, superhero culture wasn't just something you saw in comic books or on TV. It was something you wore. Enter Underoos, a line of children's underwear that transformed everyday kids into their favorite superheroes. These weren't just undergarments. They were full-on costume experiences. A pair of Superman underoos didn't just keep you covered. It made you feel invincible. Underoos came in sets that matched the colors and designs of iconic characters like Batman, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, and the Hulk. Kids would run around the house in their underwear, pretending to fly, fight crime, or save the world. It was imaginative play at its finest, and the underwear itself became part of the fantasy. For many children, slipping into their underoos was the first step into a world of adventure. What made underoos special was how they blurred the line between clothing and costume. They were marketed as underwear that's fun to wear, and they truly lived up to that slogan. Parents loved them because they were practical, and kids adored them because they felt like they were stepping into the shoes or tights of their heroes. Today's kids have endless options for dress-up, from elaborate cosplay outfits to digital avatars. But back then, a simple pair of themed underwear was enough to spark hours of imaginative play. There was no need for expensive accessories or high-tech gadgets. Just a child, a pair of underoos, and a vivid imagination. Underoos weren't just a product. They were a cultural phenomenon. They represented a time when childhood was simpler, creativity was king, and being a superhero was as easy as getting dressed in the morning. Record stores as social hubs. In the 1970s, record stores were more than just places to buy music. They were vibrant social spaces, cultural landmarks, and gateways to musical discovery. These shops were often dimly lit, filled with rows of vinyl albums and staffed by passionate music lovers who knew every obscure band and underground hit. For many teens and young adults, visiting the local record store was a weekly ritual, a place to hang out, browse, and bond over shared musical tastes. Unlike today's digital music platforms, where algorithms suggest what to listen to next, record stores offered a human touch. You could strike up a conversation with a stranger flipping through the same section, or get a recommendation from a clerk who genuinely loved music. Listening stations allowed you to preview albums before buying, and sometimes you discover a hidden gem that would become your new favorite. The experience of flipping through vinyl records was tactile and immersive. Album covers were works of art, often bold, psychedelic, or mysterious, and they told a story before you even heard a single note. You'd read liner notes, admire the photography, and feel the weight of the record in your hands. It was a full sensory experience that added depth to the music itself. Record stores also served as cultural hubs. They hosted in-store performances, autograph signings, and release parties. They were places where subcultures thrived: punk, disco, rock, soul, each with its own style, attitude, and community. Whether you were a die-hard Led Zeppelin fan or grooving to Earth, Wind, and Fire, the record store was where you found your tribe. Today, while vinyl has made a nostalgic comeback, the social aspect of record stores is harder to replicate. Streaming is convenient, but it lacks the soul of discovering music in person, surrounded by others who share your passion. For those who lived it, the memory of spending hours in a record store, flipping through albums, chatting with friends, and falling in love with new sounds remains a cherished part growing up in the 1970s. Women's beauty products and signature scents. In the 1970s, beauty routines for women were defined by iconic products and unforgettable scents that shaped the decade's aesthetic. One of the most popular hair products was Sun-In, a spray that promised sun-kissed highlights without a trip to the salon. Girls would spritz it generously and sit outside, hoping the sun would work its magic and turn their hair into golden waves. It was a DIY approach to beauty, and it felt empowering, even if the results were sometimes more orange and blonde. Another unforgettable product was Love's Baby Soft, a fragrance that became a rite of passage for many young girls. Packaged in a soft pink bottle, it had a sweet, powdery scent that was marketed as innocent and youthful. The slogan, "Because innocence is sexier than you think," stirred controversy, but the perfume itself became a staple in teenage bedrooms across America. It was the scent of slumber parties, first crushes, and growing up. Makeup in the 70s was bold and expressive. Blue eyeshadow, frosted lipstick, and heavy mascara were all the rage. Women embraced individuality, often inspired by disco divas and Hollywood starlets. Magazines like 17 and Cosmopolitan guided beauty trends, and drugstores were treasure troves of affordable glam. Hair was another major focus. Feathered styles, popularized by Farrah Fawcett, were everywhere. Women used hot rollers, curling irons, and hairspray to achieve the perfect balance and volume. The goal was effortless beauty, even if it took hours to get there. Unlike today's beauty industry, which is driven by influencers and social media, the 1970s relied on word of mouth, TV commercials, and glossy magazine ads. Products weren't just tools. They were part of a lifestyle, a way to express identity and confidence. For those who lived it, the scents and styles of the 70s are deeply nostalgic. A whiff of Love's Baby Soft or the sight of a Sun-In bottle can instantly transport someone back to a time of innocence, experimentation, and self-discovery. In the 1970s, hitchhiking wasn't just a way to get from point A to point B. It was a symbol of freedom, trust, and the open road. It was common to see people standing on the side of highways with their thumbs out, hoping for a ride. Students, military personnel, hippies, and adventurers all embraced this method of travel. It was cheap, spontaneous, and often led to unexpected friendships and stories. There was a sense of camaraderie among travelers. Picking up a hitchhiker was seen as a kind gesture, a way to help someone on their journey. Drivers and riders would swap stories, share snacks, and sometimes even travel together for miles. It was a time when people believed in the goodness of strangers, and the road was a place of connection. Of course, hitchhiking wasn't without risks. There were always stories of strange encounters or dangerous situations. But for many, the thrill of the unknown was part of the appeal. It was a rite of passage, especially for young people seeking adventure or trying to get to a concert, a festival, or just the next town over. The culture of hitchhiking was also reflected in music, movies, and literature of the time. Songs romanticized the idea of hitting the road, and films portrayed hitchhikers as free spirits or mysterious wanderers. It was woven into the fabric of 1970s youth culture, a mix of rebellion, exploration, and trust. Today, hitchhiking is largely discouraged and even illegal in many places. Concerns about safety and liability have made it a relic of the past. Modern transportation apps and ride-sharing services have replaced the thumb-out method. But for those who lived through it, hitchhiking was more than a way to travel. It was a lifestyle, a statement, and a memory of a time when the road felt wide open and full of possibility. Phones without caller ID. In the 1970s, answering the phone was a leap of faith. There was no caller ID, no way to screen calls, and no clue was on the other end until you picked up. The phone would ring, usually a loud mechanical bell, and someone in the house would rush to answer it, often yelling, "I got it," or "It's for you," across the room. It was a moment of suspense every time. Phones were typically mounted on the wall in the kitchen or sat on a table in the living room. They had long, coiled cords that stretched across rooms, allowing people to talk while pacing or cooking. If you were lucky, you had a second phone in another room, but most families shared one main line. Privacy was limited, and eavesdropping was common. Recognizing voices was a skill. You'd answer with a simple hello and hope to identify the caller by their tone or greeting. Sometimes it was a friend, sometimes a relative, and occasionally a telemarketer. But you never knew until you picked up. This unpredictability added a layer of excitement or anxiety to every call. Phone etiquette was different, too. People memorized phone numbers or kept them written in address books. You'd call someone's house and hope they were home. If not, you left a message with whoever answered or just tried again later. There were no voicemails, no texts, and no missed call notifications. For kids, the phone was a gateway to social life. Calling friends to make plans, chat about school, or talk about Saturday morning cartoons was a daily ritual. And if you had a crush, calling their house was a nerve-wracking experience, especially if a parent answered first. Today's smartphones offer instant communication, caller ID, and endless apps. But in the 1970s, the phone was a simple, analog device that brought people together, one ring at a time. It was personal, unpredictable, and a central part of home life. Sugary cereals and weekend morning rituals. In the 1970s, breakfast was more than just the first meal of the day. It was a full-blown experience, especially on weekend mornings. For kids, Saturday mornings were sacred. They'd wake up early, often before their parents, and head straight to the kitchen to grab their favorite sugary cereal. Brands like Captain Crunch, Fruit Loops, Lucky Charms, Cocoa Pebbles, and Count Chocula weren't just food. They were colorful, sweet, and packed with personality. Each box was a mini adventure, with cartoon mascots, games, puzzles, and sometimes even toys hidden inside. The cereal box itself was part of the entertainment. Kids would sit at the table, reading the back of the box while eating, solving mazes, decoding secret messages, or learning fun facts. Some cereals came with collectible prizes, plastic toys, stickers, or even records you could play on a turntable. Digging through the cereal to find the prize was a thrill, even if it meant spilling half the box on the table. These cereals were loaded with sugar, and nutrition wasn't a major concern. Parents didn't worry about grams of sugar or artificial coloring. They were more focused on convenience and keeping the kids happy. And happy they were. Kids would eat bowl after bowl while watching Saturday morning cartoons, often leaving behind a trail of crumbs and sticky milk rings. It was messy, chaotic, and absolutely joyful. The commercials during cartoon blocks reinforced the cereal craze. Animated ads featured cereal mascots going on wild adventures, battling villains, or chasing after elusive marshmallows. These characters, Tony the Tiger, Toucan Sam, the Trix Rabbit, became household names and shaped the way kids thought about breakfast. Their catchphrases and jingles were unforgettable. Today, cereal aisles are filled with healthier options, and many classic brands have toned down their sugar content. But for those who grew up in the 70s, the memory of pouring a giant bowl of cereal, watching cartoons, and feeling like the weekend had truly begun as a cherished part of childhood. It was a time when breakfast was fun, carefree, and full of flavor, both literally and emotionally. Pull tabs on soda cans. In the 1970s, cracking open a soda wasn't just about quenching your thirst. It was a small ritual that came with its own quirks and risks. Soda cans back then featured pull tabs, a design that required you to lift a metal ring and yank it off completely to open the can. Unlike today's stay tab design, these tabs attached entirely and were often tossed aside without a second thought. They were sharp, metallic, and everywhere on sidewalks, in parks, at beaches, and especially around pools. These tabs were notorious for causing injuries. Kids and adults alike would step on them barefoot, resulting in painful cuts. At the beach, they blended into the sand, becoming hidden hazards. Despite this, they were strangely beloved. Children collected them, linked them together to make chains or bracelets, and used them in school art projects. Some even turned them into makeshift toys or wore them as accessories. The sound of a pull tab being ripped off, followed by the fizzy hiss of carbonation, was iconic. It signaled summer afternoons, backyard barbecues, and moments of refreshment. Brands like Pepsi, Coca-Cola, RC Cola, and Tab were staples, and the act of opening a can was part of the experience. You didn't just drink soda, you interacted with it. Environmental awareness was minimal. Pull tabs were littered everywhere, and no one thought twice. It wasn't until the late 70s and early 80s that concerns about pollution and safety led to the invention of the stay tab, which kept the tab attached to the can. This innovation drastically reduced litter and injuries, but it also marked the end of an era. For those who lived through it, pull tabs are a vivid memory, a small but powerful symbol of a time when even the simplest things had character. They remind us of a world that was less polished, more tactile, and full of little details that made everyday life feel unique. Playing outside was mandatory. In the 1970s, childhood was lived in the open air. The phrase, "go outside and play," wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Parents expected their kids to spend most of their free time outdoors, and kids didn't argue. There were no smartphones, tablets, or video games to keep them indoors. The world outside was their playground, and imagination was their most powerful toy. Neighborhoods were alive with the sounds of children laughing, yelling, and running. Streets, sidewalks, backyards, and empty lots became arenas for games like tag, hide and seek, kickball, Red Rover, and freeze tag. Kids climbed trees, built forts out of scrap wood, and turned cardboard boxes into castles or spaceships. Dirt, grass stains, and scraped knees were part of the uniform. You didn't go home unless you were hungry, hurt, or the streetlights came on. Bicycles were a symbol of freedom, with banana seats, handlebar streamers, and sometimes playing cards clipped to the spokes to make a motor-like sound. Bikes were more than transportation. They were extensions of personality. You'd ride for miles, sometimes with no destination, just enjoying the wind and the thrill of movement. Helmets were rare, and the occasional fall was just part of growing up. Summer days were especially magical. Sprinklers turned front yards into water parks. Kids ran through them in bathing suits, screaming with joy. Ice cream trucks rolled through neighborhoods, playing their jingles, and kids would scramble to find coins to buy a treat. Fireflies lit up the evenings, and catching them in jars was a favorite pastime. Even thunderstorms were exciting, a chance to splash in puddles and feel the power of nature. Parents didn't hover. They trusted their kids to figure things out, solve problems, and learn through experience. If you got into a fight, you worked it out. If you got lost, you asked for directions. There was a sense of resilience and resourcefulness that came from being outside, unsupervised, and engaged with the real world. You learned how to negotiate, cooperate, and sometimes how to stand your ground. Nature played a big role too. Kids explored creeks, climbed rocks, skipped stones, and built dams with sticks and mud. They collected bugs, watched birds, and learned the rhythms of the seasons. Even urban kids found ways to connect with the outdoors through parks, playgrounds, and rooftop adventures. The world was tactile, unpredictable, and full of wonder. Today's children often have structured playdates, organized sports, and digital distractions. Safety concerns and changing lifestyles have made unsupervised outdoor play less common. But for those who grew up in the 70s, the memory of endless afternoons outside, sunburned, sweaty, and smiling, is a powerful reminder of a time when play was spontaneous, creative, and deeply connected to the world around us. It was a time when the best adventures didn't come from a screen, but from stepping out the front door. If this trip down memory lane brought back some good vibes, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a dose of nostalgia. Now tell me, what's one thing from your childhood in the 1970s that kids today would never believe actually happened? Drop your memories in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories.